Close your eyes, wear headphones, relax, and enjoy the immersive experience. The Haunting of the Library. The library was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. John sat at a table in the back, his laptop open in front of him. He was supposed to be finishing his term paper on the history of the Civil War, but he couldn't concentrate. He kept glancing up at the clock, wondering how much longer he had to stay. The library was empty except for John and the librarian, who was busy at her desk in the front. John was starting to feel a little uneasy. The lights were dim, and the shadows were starting to play tricks on his eyes. He could have sworn that he saw something move out of the corner of his eye, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. He shook his head and tried to focus on his paper, but it was no use. He was too jumpy. He kept hearing noises, even though he knew that there was no one else in the library. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the stacks. It sounded like someone was moving around. John froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't want to believe that there was someone else in the library, but he knew that he couldn't just ignore it. He slowly got up and walked over to the stacks. He peered into the darkness, but he couldn't see anything. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The stacks were silent. John could hear his own breathing echoing off the shelves. He started to walk down the aisle, his footsteps echoing on the floor. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing in the shadows. He froze, his heart in his throat. The figure was tall and slender, and it was wearing a long black coat. John couldn't see the figure's face, but he could feel its eyes on him. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. The figure started to walk towards John, its footsteps silent on the floor. John wanted to run, but he was too afraid to move. The figure reached out its hand towards John. John wanted to scream, but he couldn't. He closed his eyes and waited for the end. But the end never came. When John opened his eyes, the figure was gone. John stood there for a moment, trying to catch his breath. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew that he would never forget it. He turned and ran out of the library, not stopping until he was safe in his dorm room. He locked the door and collapsed on the bed, his heart still pounding. He didn't know what to think. Had he really seen a ghost? Or was it just his imagination? John didn't know the answer, but he knew that he would never be able to forget what he had seen that night in the library. To continue, go to our YouTube channel